So it feels to me in some ways, and forward-looking, if you plan to do things like this in the future and you put your next analytics RFP together, you better really understand what people can do with rich internet apps, because it is a tidal wave that's coming. It sounds like your short-term workaround of combining Flash elements and HTML elements is a short-term fix while we're kind of awaiting for somebody to be able to measure what's going on in these apps. But I have not run into a situation where you can ever know enough of what's going on in these apps yet. None of my customers I know that have used this have had intense metrics with behavior. Yeah. Just Blinds with Flex did it. And they optimized it and like tuned it up 30% or something. Good.
I think it's just to reiterate, starting from what are the things you're going to want to measure, what are the targets you're going to set, how do you go after them, and making sure the guys at Core Metrics, the guys at Omniture, the other analytics vendors, they're involve them at the early stages. See if there's some creative things. Once you know what it is you want to track, involve them. I found them to be very supportive of looking at things in different ways so that you can get to the right data.
Good. Other stuff?
Yeah. When you look at the Sears shoe example and the Burton example for merchandising, the production cost per page for that must be pretty high. Where do you draw the line in that treatment within your assortment? If you're Sears, you can't do it for every single product. What's the right amount? And then how does that change the user experience around having sort of rich merchandising in one set of products and the others are kind of flat?
So I'm going to give you, there's two parts to the answer. The first part goes back to the other question about analytics. If you have strong analytics and you get a sense of, from an A/B standpoint, people who view this versus people who view the other, and see what the integrated experience can do, see what kind of uptick you can get, then you do it as a math exercise. Now, I'm not saying it can all be completely objective where the only things you do are things that are beyond a certain ROI threshold. But if you set that up front, you actually have a chance to do that. I think the other stuff you look at is wanting to make sure, just like we talked about with having a key item from a merchandising standpoint, or a key look or something else, having some of these things as your featured item, even when other things don't have that same level of touch, I think it's something that people are okay with. When you walk into a store, there are things that are on feature, and there are things that are in the perimeter. And I think it's just a matter of using some of the same kind of merchandising acumen to try and bring those things to life.
Yeah, I'd break it down into two parts, because Burton and the Sears example are two very different realms. The Burton example of a Flash kind of next generation site can potentially apply to any company, any number of products, any type of products. I think the question on that end is how big and how important is your web business to you? You know, if you're a really big web business and you can do something like that and maybe dial up loyalty, customer experience, and conversion rates by 10%, your ROI case may be made very quickly because you're applying a lot of innovation across a large revenue base. Whereas if you're a $5 million website, you can never do that, because if you spend $1 million building a really cool all-flash website, you just don't have the revenues to justify it. So that's the interface side. When I think of the content side, it really breaks out to number of SKUs and type of SKUs. So if on one end of the spectrum I'm Brookstone, and I've got 100 products that are highly demonstrable, I would run, not walk, to create video, right? Because you know that you don't have to create that many, and it's going to pay back like crazy, and you can measure that. If on the other hand, I'm Waverly Fabrics and I have 10,000 fabrics, it's impractical and actually not useful for that, and nor would something like a product tour. That's when you begin to think of things like configurators, where how can I, in a repeatable way, apply lots of fabrics in context so people can get comfortable with them over the web. So I think kind of wrap up, size of business and strategic nature of business will depend the investment on the framework. I think the content is very specific to category and number of SKUs that you have. Low SKU count, highly demonstrable, product tours, videos, and all that's interesting. Massive SKU count. The baseline these days is great imaging. And then you can say, okay, can I go up to multiple images? Okay, can I go into on-site lifestyle images? And keep working your way up the chain until you can say, okay, I've hit my ROI threshold of, I'm going to do some hero shots, I'm going to do multiple views and images, but I've got 5,000 SKUs, so I can't move up now to product tours, videos, et cetera. Yep. That's kind of the framework I always think about. Good. Other stuff? Mike is on its way.
Have you integrated where, let's say, Sears could have a fashion show at a flagship store, edit that and configure it for the web, put digital monitors in the store windows, digital monitors in the sections So it's a totally integrated, multimedia, multi-touch point experience.
I think what you're talking about is a great wave of the future. I've not really seen anybody do that well yet.
One only company that's done it in a big way I know is Polo.
Yeah, what Polo did in their Windows, you know, where it was fully interactive, and I think they've done some of that. That would be the same example that I would pick out.
But I like the concept, which is, and it backs to the ROI question, if you can think of multiple ways to leverage these investments, that's where you may build a new business case. So I was talking to an apparel company who's got a huge web business the other day. They had a customer service issue with a product, and they happened to have had video, and they used the video in the part of serving customers who are having problems with it to avoid calls to the call center. So I think your case study hasn't happened yet, and it's probably not on the horizon, although I've heard it talked about as often as getting your cell phone page when you're walking by a Starbucks with a coupon. You've heard that one too?
Yep.
But I think the notion of cross-channel leverage of content, it has a lot of merit. If you're a business that has a B2B arm and you can arm your sales force with these investments so they can go out and better sell to channels and whatnot. So I think we've hit 4 o'clock. I'd like to really thank everyone for coming here for the last session. I'm blown away by the interest and participation. I hope you liked the casual format. Paul and I kind of wanted to try something new, that it wasn't heavily moderated or heavily presented, and we just went through a bunch of stuff. So if you like the format, feed it back to shot.org. I'd like for overall more formats to be more interactive and more dynamic and fewer slides.
Yep.
So anyway, thanks for coming.
Thank you.